And it is just slightly past the hour here on WSYCF 88.7 FM. You're listening to Greek Speak on this Friday, November 22nd, 2024. It's a snowy day here in Shippensburg University in Shippensburg, PA. And I am here, your host, Luke Rainey. Joining alongside me for today's show is Michael Luzi. We don't have Andrew Mercier with us today. He was feeling a little bit under the weather. So if you're listening, Andrew, obviously hope you're doing well. And I'll be sure to do the best I can carrying it solo today. But we do have a great guest with us today. It is Michael Luzi, like I said, one of the most involved brothers of the Kappa Sigma fraternity here on our campus. Michael, thank you for joining the show this morning.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Luke.
Yeah, so I'll just start off like I do every single week. And this is the same question. You've heard it many times before, and you'll hear it once more. Why did you choose Greek life? Why did you choose Kappa Sigma? Because I obviously met you at a similar time when we were both planning on rushing, but why did you do it? You seemed a lot more certain about it than I was, that's for sure.
Well, I think for a long time I've thought about being a part of Greek life, and my mom was a part of Greek life here at Shippensburg University. She was here from 1987 to 1991, and she was part of Alpha Phi's local chapter before they were national, and she had a really good time, and she just has always talked about it, and her sisters from when she was here have stayed her closest friends till now, and every once in a while, like every year, they'll go up to one of her sorority sisters' cabins, and they'll have like a weekend hangout.
Wow. So having that family influence made a big difference then, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so whenever you were thinking about joining then, so when did you come to campus thinking, I'm going to join a fraternity at some point?
Yes.
You did. You were very certain on it, because that is, honestly, that's not the most common answer I hear. So with that said, you then narrow it down, obviously, to some point, and you eventually say Kappa Sigma is going to be the one. How did that decision come about?
So, one of the big things for me was I tried out for the club volleyball team, and I met my big Michael Burrows, and he kind of he was very friendly and introduced me to a lot of the brothers of Kappa Sigma. Before I had gotten to know a lot of the other fraternities, but being a first semester freshman, I still went to the other rush events for the other some of the other fraternities. But overall, I became better friends with a lot of the Kappa Sigma members, and that was most of what drove me to join Kappa Sigma, just becoming close friends with a lot of the brothers, and yeah, basically that.
What do you think it was about the connection there that kind of got things started? Because obviously, we're in a biased room, both of us being in Kappa Sigma. I have my own answers for it, but what do you think it was about the guys in our chapter that especially at that time, that stood out to you?
I think it was just, it was a very warm environment, and I just felt welcomed, and everyone was trying to get to know me, and it didn't seem like I had to force my way into anything. It was, all of the people were kind and showed interest in everyone around me, and they didn't seem like they were specifically focusing on a specific person.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got the same rep whenever I would go down, and I had talked about this pretty openly on the first show we did. Is that it was, I think a lot of the effort went to the person who was in charge of recruitment, and was Andrew Mercier, who oversaw that, and of course he's our co-host of the show. But Andrew, I think really had a knack for assessing people's needs and their interests and what they were looking for whenever they made a decision to rush Kappa Sigma, or thinking about trying to rush Kappa Sigma. And one of the things that stood out to me was he was always quick to text separately. He was quick to consider me as someone that he was interested in recruiting before I was even interested in recruiting. So he did a fantastic job with it. But I think, it spoke to the character of the people in the chapter. And it seemed like about this time a year ago, there's kind of a recognition by everybody that it was the place to be. And I would say, we're sitting here a year later, and we have 52 brothers active right now, and we are in. Typically the fall is the low point because we don't recruit very well in the fall those years. Obviously, that was a different story at 15 brothers that we now have in because of this semester. So the growth of the chapter is impressive, but I think that speaks to, again, strong recruiting and inclusive recruiting, I would say, more than anything. Which this all segues into, I think, a good conversation to have with you about your responsibilities with Kappa Sigma, because you're a man of many hats down there, Michael, and so am I in many senses, but I think you really take it to the next level. So what all do you do? I think you said there were 5 different things that you're in charge of.
All right, so I am co-social chair with Troy Gazel. I am lead of the fundraising chair. I'm lead of the Sweetheart chair. I am part of the DEI committee. I am like unofficial art chair. It's not really a chair, but I help out with a lot of the artistic stuff. And then I'm also part of Rush.
Yeah, so we'll break it down. Was that 5 or 6? I couldn't even count.
It's technically 5. The art one isn't
Art
really.
counts as 6. Okay, so we'll break some of these down. So you mentioned from the top. So talk just a little bit about social.
All right, so for social, Troy and we help plan social events with other organizations, and that also kind of ties into the diversity, equity, and inclusion chair, because we invite different organizations to different events that we hold. Like, for example, we have done a Filipino dinner, which was hosted by Theo Campamones. He is Filipino, and he made a presentation to educate us and like the people around us he made a presentation to educate us on his like ethnicity and all of his culture, and he made dinner with foods from his culture. And another example is Reed Gross, one of our brothers. He is Jewish, and for Rosh Hashanah, he created a slideshow educating all of us on Rosh Hashanah and made us Jewish foods for all of us to celebrate with him. And it really brought us all together and closer, because a lot of people didn't know a lot of these things about these brothers, and it made us understand their religion and culture more.
Yeah, it was very open, and a very, again, it was a great event, and I think what especially made it unique is I think there's few things that bring people together more easier than having good food. And I think one of the most impressive things about both events was, of course, not only the educational component of it, but it was a way to show skills.
Yeah.
It was a way for Reed. I mean, I know you helped with food preparation for Reed's for sure. Did you do help for Theo's as well?
Theo did most of his.
Theo did most of his, yeah. Because I know with Reed, like he was overseeing a lot of the food preparations, and then you guys were cooking for hours on end before that, and you're treating about 30 to 40 people, I think, that were in attendance that night. And it was just something that was totally different. We'd never done anything like that before, and this goes back to, again, like the stigmatization around what Greek life was often associated with, and frat culture, so to speak, and it chips away at that. It shows like there is a lot more to it, and that there is an opportunity for Greek life to be a very inclusive and a very good space for, especially in a fraternity, for men to kind of express themselves and to showcase areas of their culture that are important to them. So those 2 events were really good. The Reed and Theo did. And we also, last night we had an inclusive leadership workshop with Dr. Bridget Allen. She was actually a guest on this show 2 weeks ago. And that was a central theme that we had talked about, was ways to make Greek life more inclusive. And the workshop was kind of a nice way for people to share. So obviously, I could tell you really enjoyed that yesterday. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, please do.
Well, I think that it was a very important event, and I think it's important that people feel more comfortable talking about their identities, and it shouldn't. I don't think it has to be a tough topic to talk about, and it's definitely a stigma in like Greek life and big organizations that you don't talk about these tough topics. But I think in the future, especially with events like last night, it can make it easier and make people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that she hit on, it was a good theme, was that, and I part of me kind of disagreed with the point, but I understood what she was saying, was that whenever we have a chapter of this many people, 52 people, and we are trying to accommodate the needs, aptitudes, abilities, concerns, and identities of all of our members, it is tough to do that for 52 people. However, with 52 people, and I pride myself, I've said it many times, 52 people, technically speaking, that's more than 1% of all Shippensburg University students are brothers at Kappa Sigma. But with that said, with numbers like that, you're naturally getting a diverse pool of people. I mean, we have diversity in pretty much every aspect of our fraternity, whether you look at demographic or psychographic characteristics. So I think diversity is easier to achieve whenever you have a larger number of people, especially at a college campus where big part of the college education is you are meeting people from different cultures and experiences. But having that size actually helps in many ways, but it's also, she was 100% right, that it can serve as a challenge because you're accommodating all those different voices. But I'm going to transition now into different topics, but real quick, we'll take a quick pause here. Listen to Greek Speak on WSYC 88.7 FM. It's Luke Rainey and Michael Luzi this week.
Listen to Greek Speak on WSYC.
Doing good so far. We're doing what we can. What do you want to talk about? Anything you have in mind specifically as a segue?
Greek life with Luke Rainey, Andrew Mercier, plus special guests every Friday at 10 a.m.
Fundraising logistics. Sure.
All right. And we'll keep the conversation going here with Michael Luzi again on Greek Speak. And we talked a little bit about diversity. We talked a little bit about your social roles. So now we're going to transition into fundraising. So you're on the fundraising committee. You participate in that pretty closely with our treasurer, Luke Hilligus. Luke has given you praise already on this show for the work that you do with the committee. So talk to us a little bit about that role. How did you have interest in fundraising first off, or was it just kind of something they gave you and just kind of had to learn it, or how did that come about?
Well, I've had interest in fundraising just in general throughout like high school and stuff. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't say naturally to me, but I enjoy talking to people and working at events. So helping the fraternity in another way was just a positive for me. And Luke kind of oversees everything, and we like work together along with Dylan Wozni and Dylan Malone to like set up all the events and make sure everything is like correlated well. And so the way we do it is in the middle of every month we have a meeting, and we do this for philanthropy and fundraising, and we set up all the events for the next month to make sure everything is squared away and that we have like forms signed and like just to make sure everything is in place, so everything goes smoothly. And I just feel like it's a very important position for an organization like this, because we need to like gather money to like run
to operate. It's survivability. I mean, that's the whole thing. And I think, well, the big skill I think you learn from that more than anything is just the nonsense of red tape and like restrictions and requirements and paperwork you have to go through, especially if there is a dollar sign attached to it. And I'm being candid about this right now. I'm the vice president of our public relations Student Society of America chapter, and that's something where it's like anytime we plan an event like that, the logistical paperwork hurdles are just, they're rough. But obviously they're there for good reason, there for good purpose. So I'm not knocking it that way. but that's an important skill to have anywhere in life, because it's not something that you necessarily get prepped for. It's not something that kind of, you're expecting to do whenever the job comes about. Like, I'm sure your first thought you're doing fundraising is, oh, we just have to kind of have this creative aspect to it. But the underlying kind of, I don't want to call it the armpit, so to speak, of fundraising, but the kind of the downside of it is, again, the tedious setup and preparation work, getting the boxes checked off in order to make sure anything runs smoothly. So it's an important skill to have. Obviously, we've had 2 successful hot dog fundraisers on Richard Avenue this semester, so we did really well with that. The first one, we ran out of supplies. I wasn't able to go to the second one, so I think that went pretty well.
It went well.
Good to hear. Yeah, for sure. And then, we've had other fundraising projects as well. We have the philanthropy. I know you're not necessarily a part of that side of it.
We kind of work together on most aspects, though. Oh, and also another thing that I really like about it is creating creative ideas for the events. And that's like kind of what I enjoy about it, is thinking of things that people will actually want, or like more like enjoy participating in. So they're getting something out of it and we're getting something out of it.
Yeah. It is quite good. And yeah, again, like that mutually beneficial relationship is extremely important. And and like I said, you guys have done a great job with it, and without having a good fundraising operation, without having good money management skills, the whole thing falls apart, because you're not to again, not to reveal too many secrets about it, but it's like we work in we're in 5-digit territory when it comes to that fraternity for how much money is going where. And that's obviously a very stressful job for Luke to try and manage, and especially for someone like Luke, who really he kind of had to learn that on the fly whenever he got in, had a transition process with our previous treasurer who helped him out a lot. It has been something that I think we've found a way to, you guys have found a way to do a fantastic job, and obviously with the help of your entire committee, it makes a big difference. But we served together on Rush Chair throughout this past semester, and like I said earlier at the top of the show, it was a very, very successful role in it. My role was definitely more of an oversight position, but how did you assess the process of Rush and talking to potential members throughout the summer? Because those 4 months, that's a long time to kind of be away from everybody, but we also had to make sure that they were still interested, in joining our fraternity throughout that time period. So how did you assess that?
I think the way that I approached it was just to talk to them and make sure that I was their friend, and make sure like to find common interest and just communicate to them about how they're doing, how their summer's going, how life in general is going. I think that's a very important aspect to just become friends with them. That's basically what I did.
Well, that's the easiest way for recruitment, and I always talk about on the show. A lot of times, 99 times out of 100, and I kind of mentioned it on our first ever show. It's kind of the opposite way, but it's friendship first and then brotherhood. For me, I kind of had it flipped, and I explained why in our first episode what was going on. I kind of had I wanted to seek the brotherhood first, and I had a feeling that friendship would eventually come with it, and it did. So I was right about that. But like you said, establishing those friendships, making sure they're still kind of having that interest, keeping your earpiece, keeping their earpiece still kind of perked up, throughout the summer was extremely important. But I think also a lot of our recruitment effort, though, wasn't just a summer job. It was the first 3 weeks before Rush Week on this campus, because I remember, I talked about this last week, we went from I'd say a small pool of people we were looking at to all of a sudden we were just multiplying, it seemed like, by the week.
Yeah, it was I was very impressed with what, I was shocked with what happened, and I think most people were. I don't think anyone expected to get 15 new brothers in the fall, which was record-breaking for our chapter, and it was just crazy.
It was unbelievable. And again, that breaks records for our chapter within the fall. But obviously, this is a chair where it's the kind of joke that we've been running, so far in the chair is it's definitely, it's not a rush week never ends, so to speak, is kind of the motto. But
Yeah.
simultaneously, there's obviously busy season when it comes to chair like that. So the joke we always say in chapter, of course, our chair DJ Jackson, who always say, "Well, it's not rush week right now." So the only problem right now is we are actually kind of close to spring rush. We're probably at this point halfway between, as far as days on the calendar, fall rush from this year and then spring rush in 2025. So we do have an upward battle to work with when it comes to talking with some people that may be interested in joining us. Some of your first year students for sure. But when it comes to recruitment ideas, obviously we're now at a point where we don't need numbers. We have 52 people, so numbers is not a problem. Obviously, you recruit quality, then you'll get quantity. Don Edmiston, our alumni advisor, he says that all the time, and I think that's a motto to live by for sure. But what exactly, because we can definitely be more selective about things, what are you looking for out of people whenever they're looking to rush?
Well, definitely, just like you said, I'm looking for people's quality of character, and that's a very important thing to me. I try to surround myself by kind people and people who care about others, and those are kind of the people that I'm looking for, and people with a strong work ethic and a drive to get things done. That's most of what I look for.
Yeah, the way I see it as well is to have that drive to work for, and then more importantly, kindness, quality of character. And I think, whenever I look at, the recruitment process, and I think this is where I was I was a benefactor of kind of this philosophy, was sometimes it's not always about people, you recruit people as far as how can they help us? It's more of sometimes it's how can we help them? Yeah. And I think for me, it was there was both questions being answered there whenever they were looking at whenever they were evaluating me, was how are they going to be able to help me? And they knew I had the skills and I had the wherewithal to be able to handle a job like social media, public relations, things like that. And of course, the things I do with scholarship right now and the things I do with Rush, they were confident that I could do it. And then I wasn't able to participate in the entirety of the process, but our SMART goal evaluation was another thing we also did, which is our yearly performance evaluation. I guess that's another conversation we can then segue into, because you were part of this. And I saw the photos, and obviously the photos were posted, but you were having conversations with our president, Charles Patterson.
So basically what that night was, we were talking about all of our SMART goals and our goals that we're achieving in many different aspects of our fraternity. And this was an event that all of the fraternities and sororities were involved in. And it's basically just saying what all of our goals are for the year and this past year. And this was kind of I got brought into this. I wasn't necessarily supposed to be presenting until a few days before, and the one person that really stood out to me during this process was Andrew Mercer. He is very knowledgeable about all of the aspects of our chapter, and he has a very good grasp on how to improve our chapter and the ways we can improve it. And
he has a very strong vision.
Yes. Yeah. And I saw that while we were presenting during the event. He was very articulate in all of the things that he was talking about. And for example, our GPA. He mentioned that we didn't exactly get to our goal, but we still improved significantly. Overall we had a 3.06, and our goal was to get to a 3.2. But he talked about how maybe in the future we can make smaller goals, but to still improve.
Yeah. Well, that's I think, we look at the long-term vision, again, the quantity of people, and that's where wholesale changes, ups and downs when it comes to things like a GPA metric. Those are tough. We're gonna have a number. If we have 52 people, we're gonna have a number, and it's kind of gonna be it'll bump up or down by fractions. but it's not going to be. You're not going to have wholesale improvements. That's reality. I mean, it's not it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just what it is. And I think Andrew having that sort of ability to recognize that and present that in an articulate manner, especially to high stakes individuals on our campus, again, like Charles Patterson, was very important. It's an asset for us for sure. And I think I would say, with bar none, he is probably the most, I'd say, fierce person in the fraternity when it comes to working towards those long-term visions and ensuring the survivability of the chapter. And that, obviously, that goes to the entire executive board.
This is all the executive committee.
Yeah.
This is just what I observed from being at the event.
Yeah, for sure. And, proof was in the pudding, because one of our goals would involve, like, that inclusive leadership workshop, having something in there about that, and we were able to do that yesterday, and we had a solid turnout within the fraternity. So it's it was a good thing, and I was glad that you guys were able to present that. We had a lot of strong faces representing us that night. But we're going to take a little bit of a quick break, and then we'll be back on the other side with some more conversations. Again, you're listening to Greek Speak with Luke Rainey and guest Michael Luzi today on WSYC 88.7 FM.
Out here, in the middle of all these acres, it can feel like you're the only person on Earth. And sometimes, that's how it feels when you're going through tough times. Stress builds up, you have trouble sleeping, maybe your mind is racing and you just don't feel like yourself.
Kind of like, why
So
are
what
you
do we
nice?
do?
Why are you
We get help.
happy? Why are you...
Lots of people are
I'll
struggling with
phrase
their
it
mental
better,
health.
but just
It's
kind of
more
think
common
along
than you
those
think.
lines.
The good news is, there are people in our community who are here for us when times are tough. Sometimes, just talking to someone can make all the difference in the world, so we don't feel so alone. One thing you can do is visit loveyourmindtoday.org for simple steps you can take to find the right solution for you. Whether it's hearing stories about what other people are going through, or finding the resources we need to navigate the stresses in our lives. Visit loveyourmindtoday.org.
That sounds
That's
good.
loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ad Council.
Back at it here at Greek Speak, WSYC 88.7 FM, Shippensburg University, with Luke Rainey and Michael Luzi. And I want to switch gears because, Michael, one of the things about you that's, in my opinion, quite impressive is you know a lot of people, and a lot of people are very close friends with you. You walk into a room, and people are instantaneously ready to give you a hug, ready to greet you in a very pleasant way, because there's something about you, there's something about your personality that just carries a sort of, I'd say, a welcoming environment. So, and it's a hard question to answer, I think, but like, how did you develop that sort of like ability to be extremely social, number one, extremely connected, and then also just have someone like where people like they're expecting to see, they want to see you in environments because they trust you as like a very friendly person. It's like, how'd you become like that type of character?
Well, first of all, thank you. I really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I think growing up, I think my parents have a lot to do with that. I think the way they raised me to be kind to everyone. And sorry, excuse me. I think that the way I see the world is that I'm going to be nice to you as long as you treat me with respect, and even if at first you don't treat me with respect or you're not kind to me, I want to try and be nice no matter what, because I think there's too much hatred in this world, like in our society, and I feel like people attack with this is a hard question.
Yeah.
I feel like people attack very fast without starting to listen to what others have to say, and my perspective is I try to listen to what everyone has to say and then try and have a conversation about it and make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And I just try to bring joy to people. That's like my number one goal.
Yeah.
I just try to be nice and make friends in any situation. And I don't really know how to explain how I do that, but I don't.
It's something you develop over time for sure, and I think, like, one of the things about it is, like, I think, you know, my upbringing, obviously it's like we're all naturally raised and we're naturally expected, and you to be kind to one another. I think that's something that we're all like brought up with. But I do think sometimes the background you kind of come from, you know, if it is siloed out, for example, you know, that's where you kind of start, like, you don't have that connection with, like, other cultures, other groups nearly as much. If you kind of have, again, like, kind of a reclusive upbringing. It's like, that's just the way the world is. I mean, everybody grows up in different circumstances. So, again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's different. But I think there's something about that where it's like, again, like, that priority, that constant emphasis on it is very important. And just, there's something about it because it's like I'll say this. There are very few people in my life that I can count on to never ruin my day. Like, I can name a laundry list of, like, people where it's like, yeah, if this goes wrong, my day, like, they could easily ruin my day just based on this, based on that. And it's not to say they're bad people. They're just great people. Some of my best friends I would put on that list probably. But you're one of those people where it's like, I can't ever say, like, well, my day was worse because of this negative moment. My interaction with you, my attitude became worse because of this moment I had, like, this bad moment I had with you. And that's so important. And it's especially, I think, important for you because, you know, I know, like, your career interests. So if you want to share that real quick, because.
All right. So my career interest and my major is early childhood education, and I think that is very, like, that what we were just talking about is very important in that field because you cannot have a bias when you are in a like in an elementary school or like early childhood environment. You have to accept everyone for the way they are, and you have to help them because a lot of the times they can't help themselves. And you have to bring them into this world knowing that they are important and they have a purpose.
And I think your role becomes increasingly critical because obviously, you know, you're looking at it at the age of, you look at young children who are very, you know, emotionally malleable. They're very, you know, there's a lot of influence that you can have as far as the characters that they become because ultimately as an elementary school teacher, you get 7 hours a day with your students for 180 days a calendar year.
Yeah, you're one of their primary caregivers.
Yeah, and that's where it's like there's a lot of research done as well where it's like you have like people need 3 solid institutions in their life that they can count on as far as support. For children, it would be 1, family, 2, school, and then 3, they need some sort of strong community influence. A lot of times nowadays, and I think this is probably to their detriment, they're flocking to internet communities, and I think there's a lot of problems to be had there. There's not a real world interaction. You're also seeing, I think, in my opinion at least, you are seeing family structures becoming a little bit weaker, and you could get into a huge discussion about why exactly that is. I'm just saying that's what the reality is. But the one thing that's there is school. It is there. It's education. You know, it's mandatory for kids to go, obviously. So you have such an important role in that. And I think that it will set you apart, especially as a man entering elementary education.
That's also a part of why I did it is because because I came into college as a business major, and my mom is a part of education. Her career is a paraprofessional at a middle school, and so I've grown up in that kind of environment. So that was like one of my options coming into college. It just wasn't what I picked at first, and the reason why I changed is because I realized that I want to be more involved with, like, one-on-one with people, and a lot of the time in business that's not what you're doing.
Yeah.
And with education, you're always going to get that.
That's good. The personal connection of it. I mean, and especially the whatever size classroom you enter. Obviously, it depends on the school you go to. You could be dealing with 10 kids. You could be dealing with hundreds. But I think that's that is extremely important because there is still going to be that one-on-one no matter what the size is, and it's so important to get that get the personal connection with your students. Not only as an educator, you're educating them obviously on on content with like curriculum, with math, reading, arithmetic, things like that. But then the social education, I think in my opinion, far more important.
And just like I've just recently been learning in my education classes so far that play is a very, very important aspect of education, and it's needed for children at such a young age.
Right, and you have to know how to play well.
Yeah.
Because it's not, obviously you have to learn the art of sharing. You have to learn, and it's like those skills, like in my cases, those are really developed before elementary school.
Yeah, and that all is more of parenting, like from a young age, and understanding the developmental milestones for children. And I think that like these milestones should be more of a known thing for parents, because I feel like there are a lot of these aspects that are not public knowledge for developmental milestones for children.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not something like we overlook it at times.
Yeah.
And I think, we can talk about the play, and like maybe I hope I'm not like butchering the explanation because I'm sure you know a lot better than I do. But I think one of the things you learn with play is you learn aggression in a simulated environment. Obviously, it's called play, so it's not real, but it's tempered aggression. Also, the art of winning and losing. Understanding your limits is very important at a young age. Because I remember watching this video of this child. He was like 3 or 4 years old, and he was this chess mastermind. I mean, he would clear most chess professionals, and he met one of the greatest chess players in the world. I think he was this player was from Russia, and they had a game of chess, and the game was very quick paced because they both knew decisions they made, and the kid got beat, and he was 3 or 4 years old, and he broke down crying, and the reason why is because he's so talented at it that he didn't have a concept of the limits of losing. And that makes a huge difference in your life. And it's like, I'm sure that moment taught him something, because he recognized well, wait, someone is better than me.
Yes.
Yes.
So being that knowledgeable about a specific subject at such a young age can alter how people react, because he hasn't been experienced to that sense of losing. So all he knows is winning. So once he finally found someone that could match him, he didn't understand how to respond.
Yeah. And there's two ways to respond to that in life. Obviously the one path is you capitulate and you kind of give up. You kind of think, well, no, I'm not, what am I? Am I really worth it? And then there's also the other path where it's like, well, wait a second, why did I get beat? I'm going to get better to make sure I don't get beat again. And of course, we're talking about this like a game of chess. It's something that's it's definitely a first world problem, losing a game of chess. But it's also a matter of you think about the setbacks you do in life. You get the rejection letter for a scholarship and an internship. Why did I lose? Why did I not get that internship? Why did I not get that scholarship? And there's a lot of introspection you have to do. But obviously with things like that, one door closes, another one opens. But I think, that's extremely important. And, for some kids, for some people, they don't discover those limits right away. For some, even as an adult, they don't know those limits really all that well. I can say, I had a pretty smooth sailing childhood when it came to academics and things like that. I was smart, pretty gifted. So typically grades don't become challenges for me. This semester is kind of a different animal though, and it's really thrown me for a loop. But I remember one of the big experiences I had in high school was I was on a academic quiz show it was the Pittsburgh affiliate for CBS, and they hosted every Saturday morning. They had 3 high schools compete against each other, and if you won your one match at the beginning of the season, you went to the playoffs and you advanced, and you kind of tournament style thing. And I won in junior and senior year both. We won. Our team won the first show, and then the second one we got absolutely killed. Just destroyed. And I I remember that was a tough moment because age 17 or 18, I had to learn those lessons of like, this is what losing feels like. This will air on the public that I lost and got embarrassed on this game show. That was not easy for me. But, and again, those scholarships you don't get, the internships you don't get, it's not easy, but guess what? It's life.
Well, that's also part of why I want to be an early childhood educator, because I can expose, not necessarily expose them to losing, but like put them in scenarios where like having the children play and doing different activities where they experience loss and winning, so that when they experience that farther into their life, it's not as big of a jump.
Yeah.
So then they understand how to react to it.
Yeah.
Being more proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah, and I think it's an important lesson, and I think that's actually one area where I think video games kind of can help, because obviously video games a lot of times they are competition in nature. So if kids are playing them and then they do lose, then it's like, yeah, you are learning that what failure looks like, and you are also learning how to get better.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation for sure. But again, I think your foresight on the issue, and I'm glad that's something that the program, like the program here at SHIP, like the education program, has worked in for you to kind of teach the importance of that. This is a really good conversation, and we're gonna close it here in a few minutes, but we'll take a quick break. We'll be back in just a second. Yeah, we saved this conversation for sure.
Yay.
We did good.
Listen to Greek Speak on WSYC 88.7.
I'm going to share a story with you at the end of the show, so I already know how I want to close it.
Luke Rainey.
I hope I'm doing okay.
You're doing really good. This discussion is the most intelligent one we've had yet. Back at it here at Greek Speak WSYC 88.7 FM. Just a few minutes to go with Michael Luzi, one of the most involved brothers of the Kappa Sigma fraternity here on campus. We had a great discussion about your passion for education and especially children's needs when it comes to emotional development. But I want to tell you a story, Michael, about an area where I think you made a profound difference in my life, and I don't know how much you realize it in this moment, but it was something that I think about often. We known each other. I mean, we were in the same new member class. We became brothers together, things like that. We were on the rush committee together. But I'd say, we probably didn't have a friendship per se until until the semester really got going. But the one thing that happened, last spring, obviously, I've shared the story before. I broke my finger first night of rush week, had surgery, rehab, everything like that. And it took 10 weeks to get out of that cast. And then we have homecoming this year. We have the dunk tank, and I injure myself in the dunk tank, broke my toe off the bottom of the floor. And that day, I remember being in pain. I remember okay, the pain's not going away. It's another extremity injury. Is it on the joint? If it's on the joint, this is going to be a nightmare to repair it. Probably could be surgery even. This is just for a toe. It felt like deja vu. And I remember I was literally at homecoming, just sitting on the ground, just staring off into having a 1,000-yard stare, just what does this mean? And the rest of the chapter, they were definitely worried about me. They were like, well, what's going on? You all right? And I'm like, no, I don't think I am. I left, and then we obviously hung out at the house later on, because that's the fun of homecoming. And the pain was still there. The injury was only getting worse as far as what it looked like. And whenever you came down the basement, I don't know if you'd known at this point or not about what had happened. I said, I told you, I said, well, I broke my toe, and it's okay, what do you mean? And I said, I think this is going to be a bad one. I didn't know just exactly how bad it was. I was thinking this was on the joint. It's going to require surgery and probably crutches. How in the world am I going to do life for the next several months? Luckily, that wasn't at all what happened. It was a very minor break. But then as I was talking to you, you didn't even say anything, and you just gave me a big hug. I don't know how else to say it, but that was one of the most emotionally beautiful moments of my life, because you recognized in that one moment what I needed. Because it was a sort of like this acknowledgement of like, I've got you. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't just like, all right, like, sorry to hear that. It was like, I have you no matter what. I'm very grateful for that, because that was a real test of character in that moment for you. And, I'm just telling you on the show right now, I thank you for that.
I really
your thoughts on that, but
I really appreciate that you felt that way, and I was really, I don't think I really noticed what I was doing in the moment, but that's kind of how I try to offer myself to people, and I'm really glad that I made you feel that way and made you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And that makes me really feel good that I helped you.
Well, it's like, and it's one of those deals where it's like, and it wasn't until I went and got looked at that it's like I knew that's how bad it was. Like, I didn't sleep that night. Went to urgent care the next day. Like, I was very anxiety ridden evening.
I remember you saying about that.
Well, I remember like sending texts out to people like 4 a.m. I'm like, oh, just like about whatever. And it's like you're anytime someone's texting at 4 a.m., there's an emotional crisis going on most likely, and that's exactly what it was in that moment. But I just remember that. I remember that night very well, because it's like there was so much that happened during that day, but it was like someone really did a gesture that, in my opinion, was authentic. It was you, and I said it to you before, but I'm saying it to you again on the show. You never ever change who you are, because your personality is going to get you places in life, and you're going to have one of the most fulfilling human experiences, I think, that anybody in our chapter ever will, because you're phenomenal. Again, at your emotional sensitivity is top notch, and it's an important skill that again, we're all taught it, but I think we all lack it in many ways. But I don't think you do. I don't think you lack it at all.
Thank you, Luke. And I know you're like hyping me up,
Yeah.
but you're the same way. Like how you were talking before about how you were saying I'm one of those people where coming into a room, like, you don't feel like I would make your day worse. You're the same way. I don't think I can think of a person that would say that you make their day worse when you see them.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because like I wear my emotions on my sleeve. You can tell when I'm having a good day or a bad day. Before the show started today, like literally like 5 minutes before the show started, how many texts and stuff, I look frazzled probably. Like, you can tell when I'm emotional, and I don't. Part of me, I think there's a.
That's not a bad thing, though.
I think in a job, I think that could be a bad thing. Like in the fields I'm going into, I think there is a kind of an emotional sort of discipline with that I think I need to get better on. But I also, I don't shame myself for that. Like, I don't, because the worst thing, I always hate when I'm interacting with someone, I can't read their emotions. I don't know if they're happy. I don't know if they're sad. I like being totally unambiguous with it. So that way people know how to react to me in that moment.
I feel as though you stay very composed, though. I feel like you keep your composure very often, more than you probably think.
Well, maybe it's just, I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because there's so much going on in my life that there isn't enough time to kind of just collapse in on myself. But I guess there's a point to that, and that's something to dwell on. And we're unfortunately at our time limit on the show, because this is something that I'm glad we had this conversation. And without Andrew wasn't able to be here today. I really wish he was, because I think that would have added a lot to our discussion for sure. But this was a compelling one for sure, Michael. And I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today in the studio, and the time we have both spent with our listeners to the show. So thank you all for listening. WSYC 80.7 FM from Shippensburg University. With Greek Speak, it's Luke Rainey. We just interviewed Michael Luzi for one heck of an hour, and we will be away next week, so we wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. But we'll have one more episode to close out the semester next week. It will be 2 weeks from now, actually, on December 6th. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Again, 10 a.m. every single Friday. Thank you all for listening. Until 2 weeks from now, we'll see you all later.
Have a good break.
I like that. I like that. That was the best show yet.